I'm going to drag this over here. So, this is interesting. How many of you are planning on doing this animation for the game design class in 2D?
What? You mean for the game design class?
Or for the game design project, I'm sorry.
Okay, there you go.
Okay, it's 4 of you. How many are left? Just 2. How many people are doing the game design project in 3D?
Like the game design, not the
Game animation project. This is weird. Okay.
Is this all my fault? Greg?
Teaching's hard, y'all. No, so I feel like I have to get. So there's 2 people who, at least, who are going to be doing this in 3D. So I'm pretty much teaching to you 2 for the most part. The rest of you actually kind of have to figure it out yourself. So that's the hard part about that. But it's easier to figure out. So first, let's sort of touch base on what's going on in D2L. We'll work our way through this. So up in D2L, I posted in the news a couple of things. One, Laura Osteen, you may have had her in some classes before. She recorded a video for her editing class on how to make Premiere less buggy. And watch that video. It will help Premiere from crashing as much as it does. So the game animation is the next project that's coming up, right? For the people who are repeating the class, I know some of you have expressed interest in doing some game animation stuff as well. I know in particular in my other class, some people are wanting to do some cinematics or cutscenes. And so I've included some videos of that, and I'm also including some videos in here of the walkthrough of what we're going to kind of be doing today, except it's the 2017 edition, right? So some stuff has changed since the 2017 edition. I would encourage you all to kind of consider doing this in 3D along with me, even if you're not going to do it in 3D as a project, simply because this is probably not the last time this will become an option for you. And I know a lot of people don't want to do, the game design project becomes like, when I announce it, is often unpopular. Right? A lot of people are like, I don't want to do that because I don't want to work in games. I only want to work for film. So what we're doing in the game design project is making basically 4 animations, kind of 6 animations, that will import into a game engine, and then it'll be a playable version of you'll be able to play your character's animations in Unreal. The reason I sort of make people do that is because it is where more of the jobs are. Right? 3D game design is a larger industry than the film industry right now. It's even making more money than the film industry. And even if that weren't true, The Mandalorian was filmed using Unreal. So pretty soon you're going to not have a choice. If you want to do animation, you're doing it in real-time rendering. Like real-time it's where it's at. Like it's where the future is headed. So whether you're in film, whether you're in TV, all of this is applicable, with the exception of some instances of 2D animation, right? Unreal is a 2D animation game engine as well, or a 2D game engine as well. That's not necessarily the part that I'm covering. And since it's not the easiest 2D game engine to use, I'm giving you the option to also use Construct, but with Construct you just have to create more of the assets, a little less of the programming. So let's look at the project first, and then look at the schedule, and then we're actually going to have to make a change to the schedule because of some of the hiccups I was having earlier today in class. So basically, though, this first set of videos is what we're going to be going over today and tomorrow about Unreal. And I had content, and I'm going to go to project briefs. We'll look at the game set. There's a couple of typos in here I need to fix. So why we're doing this, lots of jobs are in games and animation. I just explained why we're doing this. Like it's a pretty significant project. It's also the project where a lot of the people who graduate from this department and say they want to do game animation figured out that they actually really love it. Right? And so they kind of force it on you to make you try it out and realize it's not as bad as you think it is. In fact, if you go in and if you were to go in and film an animator in a game studio working at their desk and go in and film a person in a film studio working at their desk, it's going to look exactly the same. They're using the same software. The only real difference is what do you do with it after you've animated it. Do you export this out into a game engine, or do you render it inside of Maya or Arnold, right? So what we're going to be doing, using one of the designated game-friendly characters, so it's basically nothing with a face, or with a full face rig, right? You'll create all 4 of the animations listed below. We're going to do an idle, a run, an attack, which is like a stationary punch or a kick, not using a weapon, so just because we don't want to complicate the Unreal parts of this more. And when I say stationary, it means you're going to start from your idle pose. Your character may take a step forward when they punch, but they have to get back to their starting pose, right? So it starts and ends in the same pose. You will play some games where they go off of their route, where they step forward when they attack. The programming side of that, the stuff we have to do in Unreal to make that work, is actually kind of complicated, and so I don't really want to get into that. I mean, it's not impossible, and we actually have a person who's repeating the class in the first section of this, who's doing that, who's intentionally taking something off of route. But for this class, we'll have enough little hiccups to be worrying about. So, the fourth animation we're going to do is a jump, which is actually 3 animations. We're going to subdivide that jump into an up, an idle, or an up, a loop, and then a down animation. So why do we need that? Like the first part of that animation is the character coming off the ground. The second part is them floating in the air, and that is going to loop as many times as we need it to. And then the last part is the landing. Why do we need to do it that way instead of all one long animation?
Because the height of various jumps is different, and so it may need to idle longer for some,
Right.
and you can only do that by creating a loop.
Right. So like you may be falling 30 feet, or you may be falling 2 feet.
I was just gonna say, plus the idle jump animation is for jumping, but it's also just if you fall off something, that's what it's used.
Right. You need to be able to not fall stiff-legged, right? Yeah, exactly. So when we'll do that, after we make those animations, I mean not after, but we're going to import all the animations into a basic Unreal 4 level, and then we'll make them functional as a playable character. Right, so you will be able to play the animations that you made. We're going to turn in. So the thing we're going to turn in is a screen capture video of the animation in game, and that's going to be. Where's my water bottle? Dang it! We're going to turn in a screen capture of a playable character, or your game, your character in game, and then you're also going to turn in 2 play blasts of each of the animation. Now, the thing that I'm grading is the screen capture of the in-game animation. The reason for that is because that is the method in which it will actually need to be seen, right? We recognize that we can't change a movie, right? I can't, no matter how many times I try, I can't make Buzz, or Woody not push Buzz out that window, right? Like, I can watch it over and over again, the movie's always going to go the same way. That's not true with a game, right? The player's input is what is the most crucial part of how your animations are conveyed, right? So, the animation, or the animator's job, is actually just to make reactionary elements within the game to show the player that their input had meaning, right? So think of it this way: if you have something that's running at you, right, and you have to jump over it, right? And you're like, all right, I'm going to jump over it when he gets close enough. And then you smack the space bar to jump. And then the character's like, all right, we're going to jump. Here we go. And then they squat down and like, all right, it's going to do it. Like, it didn't react to you correctly, right? It took too long. Like, what needed to happen is I hit the space bar and the character popped off the screen or popped up into the air correctly, held for the right amount of time, hit the ground correctly. All of that is a form of feedback that the player gets when they're playing a game. And your job as the animator is to make that satisfying and meaningful, right? So you cannot actually do that until you can play your animations in game. It can look great as a play blast and not function correctly as a game animation. So that's why we're actually going to do this project backwards. We're going to get all of your animations into the game and functioning before you animate them. I know that sounds crazy. Yeah, we're getting some inception going stuff here. What we're going to do is we're going to create the animations today, and we're going to spend a maximum of 15 seconds of work time on each animation. Okay? We're going to make the fastest, dirtiest, like ugliest version of that animation you possibly can, literally 15 seconds. I'm not exaggerating. Because all you need is some indication that when I hit the space bar or when I hit the arrow or when I hit whatever, that animation triggered, right? We're going to get the game functioning. I was planning on doing that today, but it looks like we'll finish that up on Thursday. We're going to get the game functioning with all the animations playable, and then we will refine each of those ugly animations until they look good, right? If we do it the other way, you are almost guaranteed to fail. Like I've never seen, like if you put off the exporting to the last, what you're going to see is all of those animations you spent hours and hours and hours on, you have to throw those away and start over because they don't actually work in game correctly, right? The other reason we do it this way is because we need to be able to see that our rigs will work in the engine. So there's a couple of typos in here you may have noticed, including this one that's got a whole bunch of people scared. This project is not eligible for animators wanting to work in 2D. I'll just hit backspace. There we go, I fixed it. For a long time, this was not eligible for animators wanting to work in 2D. And Kat said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yeah, are you sure we can't do this in 2D?" I was like, "I don't know how they do it in 2D." And she's like, "Oh." And so she tried it, she pulled it off, and so now I backspace over that knot. You all can give Kat a little applause if you'd like. So, yeah, exactly. It works. It's a little bit different though, because I'll be honest, the amount of work that it takes to do 4 cycling animations in 2D is less than it is to do 4 cycling animations in 3D. Sort of the trade-off of that is you get some free environments and lighting and stuff like that in 3D. 2D, you kind of have to make all of that yourself. So what I really want to see is a fully playable, finished looking level of the game, right? So that means you have to get some backgrounds, you have to get some stuff for your character to run around on. You can determine the style of that. But, yes?
If I get...
I'm your friend. Backspace, backspace, back. You have to make some fun. You can mock it off of stuff though. Like if you're wanting your character to be like Mario or something like that, like in the Mario level, like I would be fine with that. It just needs to feel like a finished level, because eventually I want you to be able to put this in your demo reel, right? And I think that this, no matter how you cut this, like if you're doing this as a 3D project or as a 2D project, what this says is to a studio or small company who's making a game, it says you're ready to step in and do the part that they don't want to do, which is the animation, right? And any that you can show that you are capable of doing the engine part, the in-game parts, is a plus for you, right? So being able to create an entire like playable level in one of these game engines just shows that you're not, like you didn't just animate this in Toon Boom and fake it. You understand how to export out a sprite sheet, or how to export out at least a sprite sequence, bring that in, time it, make it functional, stuff like that. So yeah, Chris?
Where'd you get the game-friendly rigs you said?
We'll get to that in just a second. They're actually up in the network. But the game-friendly rig thing only really applies to the 3D animation too, right? So, because I don't know what you might need your character to do. You can do the 2D animation as like complete frame-by-frame animation. You can build a Toon Boom rig of it. You can do whatever it is you want to. I know we got some people who are already kind of on a head start on that one. So, Dylan, we may have you may be our source of questions as we go along here. But yeah, we will kind of look at that, and it may be that I kind of do some quick. I will show you Construct at the end of this, and the one thing that Construct is not short on is free tutorials. Like there's all sorts of stuff, and there's actually a template that you can kind of start with for a 2D platformer as well. So there's one more typo in here. I said that this is due Thursday, March 7th. The astute student would notice that that's a Saturday. So if we go look at our schedule, I am not going to be here on Saturday. It's actually due on March 10th, Tuesday, March 10th. So let me change that. This is actually where I just pulled them over from the previous class and apparently forgot to change those two things. Now they are changed. Save and close. Now, if we look at this schedule, there is one more little error. It's not really an error. It's more of a, well, crap type situation. As it is right now, we were going to go over the engine and how to get everything into Unreal. But I had a lot of problems in the last class, and so to kind of keep this on track with both classes, I'm going to sort of change that. So it's basically these 2 days are our days that we're going to be doing that. And then we're just going to push all of this down a little bit. So we get Control C. What did I just do? Oops. There we go. And then we'll just extend engine data there. Back those off. Okay. So what we were going to do was have the engine homework due tomorrow. Now I may combine some of these later lectures because it's a long class. Like I may be able to combine the jump and the punch day and give us a work day back in that. But you'll notice that the homework due a week from today is called Homework Engine, right? Basically what that means is how the homework will function is you will bring in a fully playable version of your game and other people will play it, right? So you have to have a fully functional version of the game, like before you even start making art. This is called rapid prototyping. It's the way almost every video game production is done, because why spend a lot of time on art for something that's not fun? You always find what is fun first. So, yes?
I have a 2D platformer in the software I'm using, like that's already basically its own like little engine.
Mm-hmm.
Can I use that, or do I have to make something from scratch?
No, you can use that. I mean, you probably get more flexibility if you make stuff new from scratch, but you can use that as a starting point. So if you're doing this in 2D, if you look up Construct 3, it's a web-based package. And one of the cool things about it is if you go over here to Templates and scroll down, you'll find one here called Platformer. Now, I'm not really forcing you to make a platformer. If you wanted to make a different type of game, you could. But it needs to have those 4 animations in it, right? So it may be like an infinite runner that also has a way of stopping and a way of punching or something, right? Because then it wouldn't be an infinite runner. But if you go to this platformer and hit Open Project, it will load it up, and this is sort of your starting point for that. If I hit play on this, you'll see that it's a platform game that I can use my arrows for. If I hit up, it'll allow me to jump. The only thing that's not really triggering in here is the punch, or the attack animation. And so this is a fine place to start. When you go in here to look at your player, like the animation for the player is that, right? Or the sprite for the player is that. You would just be replacing this with a character that runs, right? So there's lots of free walkthroughs on how to use Construct 3. This is the one that probably has one of the easiest entry points for people. And it is a full game engine. It's just not the most robust game engine. Something like Game Maker or something like that has a lot more to it and a lot more control to it, but it's also a little bit, you need to be a little bit more familiar with some scripting before you jump into that. On the other end of that spectrum, we're going to open Unreal here in a minute, and Unreal can do 2D animation, or can do a 2D game. In fact, I'm going to probably show you all how you could do this entire project as a 3D platformer if you would like as well, like a side-scrolling 3D platformer, if you would rather do a 3D character. Okay, so we can come back to Construct. One of the cool things about it, though, is there's a huge amount of support in their forums. There's tutorials here. There's manuals, and the tutorials will literally be like creating a full project, right? So you can use this to kind of help sort of supplement the things that I can't cover in class, because I can't cover everything for every project in class. So how to make a platform game. That looks informative. Okay. So I am sharing the screen. I am recording the video, right? And we've kind of changed some of the deadlines on here, but we'll work with some of that as we go along. Let's look really quickly at which rigs we're going to be using. So if we go to TSU E3, DIGM classes, Greg, character animation, and resources. There are a couple of, there used to be a folder up here that said game rigs. I put that in the old folder, mainly because the models were not the best in the world. They were just kind of some quick things that were low detail that allowed you to get some game animation. What I didn't really see coming was people took this into the eventually into portfolio, and they were just reading as a little bit vanilla in some people's demo reels. So I wanted to spice that up. On top of that, there's also a couple of little tech problems like skinning issues and stuff like that in the old rigs that you would have to kind of fight through. And I really try to take as many things off of your plate as possible. So now we have a folder in here called New Game Rigs. So let's look at a few of those. So in the last 24 hours, I have tested all of these, and I am like 98% sure that all of these are game friendly enough to not cause you to pull your hair out in this project. There may be a couple of little issues, but I don't think that any of them are big, right? There are some rigs that will make you pull your hair out. And in fact, I know people who were unable to finish this project because they picked the wrong rig. If you get like 10 hours into this and you're like, this is not going into Unreal correctly, like really the best most time-saving version or answer that I can give you is to start over with another character, right? It's not impossible, but you'll spend a lot of time fighting with the unnecessary stuff, and I would rather you fight with the important stuff. Let's look at them really quick. This ASRI rig, I know it works because it's actually a free rig from a book called Game Animation. Like, it was invented to go into a game engine. One of the complications on this character, she does have a lot of like bobbly bits, right? She has like the hair, the like belt, the lots of little things that have to bounce around. So there's some extra things you would have to animate on this. She does work pretty well though, I think. A lot of these are made by that Truong guy. Some of you have probably already used some of his rigs. This one's one. It doesn't look that great in this render because it's all kind of faceted and rendered with like this reflection. We can put whatever materials we want to on it when we get it in Unreal though. So we can turn this into like some liquid metal guy, or make him into wood, like whatever it is you want to do with him once you get him in there. So we can put different materials on him. And it's a pretty simple rig that works pretty well. This cyborg rig, we'll probably have to do a little bit more material work on him after we get it in there too. But he's a good, simple rig. I think a lot of people have already used him for some stuff, maybe. This one's just sort of a simple bald female character. Again, we could always add other materials to it if you want to kind of give her like, you know, again, like liquid metal person or something like that. So there are two characters in here, this Jago and Jacket. These are these like very blocky characters, which I think would be very fun for like if you wanted to push the cartooniness of this. So we got this one, and then we kind of have like a little Incredible Hulk clone in here with this guy. Both of these are probably a little bit weightier characters too, so they got a little bit more heft to them. There's a couple of skeleton rigs in here. So there's this Kong skeleton, so it's a gorilla skeleton. This one is a little bit heavy in terms of poly count. It's almost 100,000 faces. Unreal should be able to handle that fine, but it will be a little bit larger of file sizes, maybe a little bit slower of an export. But it's a pretty neat looking character. I also have another one further down that's just a human skeleton. Yeah, here we go. Human skeleton. He has red eyes because you have to, right? There's one in here, a liger rig, which I guess is a lion-tiger combo. Yeah, and I kind of dig this one. I was a little concerned. I like the character a lot. The rig is okay, but there are a couple of settings that you'll probably have to mess around with on it. And finally, everybody's favorite, Zelda. So she works pretty well too. And actually, she's who I'm using in the other class. So yes.
I will say that if you're, I was just fiddling with that rig earlier today. If you want to use Zelda, you have to switch on specifically switch on the ability to control her cape.
Yep.
Because it's weird.
She also comes with a whole bunch of props, and you should not use those for this animation. You can use them for other animations, but getting a prop into a character's hand requires a couple of extra steps that we're just trying to save you some, you know. She can cast a spell or something, or do a punch or a kick.
Inside the user, then when we're in the Maya file, do we just delete them?
They're invisible.
Just leave them be.
Yeah. They're actually, yeah, you won't be able to see them inside the Maya file. Also, when you go in here to mesh, what is this? 3D object. Anyway, yeah, you just won't export those parts of the mesh. They're in a separate folder and everything. So, yeah, so just leave them be. Okay, so what my plan is today is to show you, one, I'm going to show you the thing that was messing up in the last class period and how we can fix it. So I kind of need you to follow along on some of this, mainly just to answer some of my questions for me. But also I think it's worth following along even if you don't do this part, or even if you decide to go 2D, just so you can kind of see some elements of it. And you may change your mind halfway through too. So before we jump into that, I want to show you really quickly what you're going to end up with when this is all said and done. So I should have been pulling this down already. It's a little bit big. Marlowe. So while this is downloading, I want you to check something for me. I want you to go to your C drive. So this PC, C, and then Program Files, and then Epic Games. What do you see when you get there? Do you see what I have, or do you just have one of those? Just one? Is it 4.23? Okay, then that's the one I'll use too. I did not realize that's where this was stored, and I searched everywhere for it, and just, if we launch Unreal, the way you would usually launch it on your computer at home, it gives you an error, which is to launch it through the Epic Games Launcher. So we can launch it through here as well, though. Does everybody have a version of Unreal in that folder? All right. So we may still run into some hiccups. If for some reason you want the new version, it's 28 gigabytes. And so that's what was happening in the last class. Is I was like, crap, I guess we got to download this. It was going to take hours. There is a place where it's stored on the network. If you decide you want to download it, I would start now. Because I literally downloaded for an hour and a half in the last class. If you go to DIGM classes, and then it's under Todd's folder, Emma, Dropbox, Spring 2020 resources, production software, and there's UE 2024. I think it was like 28 gigabytes or something like that. You'll want to store this somewhere local. Mine is stored on my C drive. You may want to store yours on a D drive. In fact, you may even look on the D drive of your current computer, and you may be able to find it in there somewhere already, because this is where a lot of the game design classes are, so I'm guessing a lot of people downloaded it. A lot of people, though, maybe put it on a portable hard drive or put it on their student drive. And so that was, actually, there's a couple of game design students in here now. Where does he usually have you put your version of Unreal?
Usually on an external, that way you can use it on any computer.
Yeah, that's what I figured. So you can do that. It's going to launch and run a little more slowly from an external hard drive, but it's still a little bit more flexible. You may consider keeping it on 2 different places. Okay, but for this class, we can use 4.23. Before we do that, though, I want to show you what the final version of what we're going to have in here is. So we will make this sort of playable version of the game. We open it up. So this is one of the old characters. He actually still works okay if you wanted to use him. I can even you can use any of them. They're just, you have to sort of make them a little more appealing. You'll notice that just by default, he's sitting there idling. When we say idle, we mean an animation that just keeps the character alive when I'm not giving it any input, right? So it doesn't look like it's paused. And so it's really subtle, but he's just kind of hovering there, just kind of standing in one pose. Idles change depending on what you need them for, right? A fighting game has a much faster idle because you need to be able to interrupt it really quickly. Usually it's a shorter idle too. If you have a character that is like a strategy game or something, they may have a really long idle. A cinematic scene may have a really long idle. That way you can cut in and out of it wherever you want to. Now, whenever I use the, yes?
Are we going to be doing like those animations where like if you leave a character sitting for a super long time, they do something special?
You can. Those are called fidgets. And a fidget animation, the only problem with a fidget animation is it takes a little bit of programming to make it happen. So really what's happening is it basically is saying if nothing happens, or if there's no input for a certain length of time, play this animation and then just go back to the idle, right? If we wanted to, you could play around with that as like a little extra element to that. One of the cool things about this is after you get one animation, or after you get this project done, we can actually expand on it quite a bit. One of the repeatable class versions of this is to make a more extended set, like where maybe you have like a sneak or like a series of attacks. So yeah, there's a lot of different ways we can build on that. As it is right now, I try to keep a relatively a relatively simple idle where he doesn't go too far off his base. And that's because at any point, I'll need to interrupt this to make the character start moving, right? So if my character's like, ooh, I gotta scratch my head, and he goes into this, and I hit the run button, then he has to blend into running from that head scratch, right? And it just looks weird. So this is sort of a neutral idle. This is one of the only animations that I will encourage you to not work in the pose-to-pose workflow for this. And you'll see that WASD keys or the arrow keys, I can use those and start running, right? So this is the run animation I did on there. We'll look a little bit on how to make, or how to reduce foot sliding. At any point I can hit the space bar and he'll jump. And so you'll see hopefully all 3 of those animations. I'm pushing off the idle up in the air, right? And then the land. The push off and the land are both really short animations. And you'll see that even if I jump from something really high, he will still idle until he hits the ground, right? And then the punch animation, I've connected to a click, like a left click, and we have it set up to where, not that object, but certain objects, he can actually cause them to react, right? Yeah, that's a weird physics thing going on. And this can become kind of addictive because, of course, you want to start building obstacle courses where you can like ride around on them. So this is just a little fun element to give you a chance to just play around inside of Unreal and get some responses, right? So that's where we're headed. That's what I hope to make. This is a very simple level, and that's one of the reasons this was kind of reading as generic to people who are watching it in demo reels. Is it looks like you did some animation for a really boring game. That's what it looks like, right? Well, there's a lot of free environments that we can download from Unreal. Again, a little bit more download time, but we can always implement what we're doing in this project into one of those environments and have your character running around in a much nicer environment for your demo reel. So that's kind of the reason to have a nicer character too, so we can have that in a nicer environment, and then it just presents as a better piece. So, okay, questions about kind of what we're doing? Okay. So, here's the part that we never got to in the previous class, but I'll go ahead and show you all anyway. To open Unreal, we have to go digging into this folder. Okay, so this is the one that's on your C drive, not the one up on the network in Todd's folder. We're going to go into Unreal 4.23. We're going to go to Engine, and then Binaries. Now, since we're using Windows 64, we'll use Windows 64. And then we're going to scroll down until we see Unreal Editor right there. If it helps, you can always drag a shortcut to that. But cancel. Let's just create a shortcut. Can I not?
If you click type to sort by type, it'll just, the first one will be application. It'll be easier to find the editor.
Oh, yeah, that could work too. Type, it works. So any of that will work, but if we double click Unreal 4 Editor, this is how we're going to open it. We'll say allow access, and then it will slowly start to open it. I'm not going to do too much in Unreal today, though. We're going to do all of the pre-Unreal stuff, and then next class period we'll do all of the Unreal stuff. So that means we're going to work in Maya mostly today, and I'm going to get everything set up to where we can export out our animations, even though we haven't made them yet, really quickly, and get them into Unreal for testing. Right? Okay, I do want to show you this, though. One of the reasons I wanted to bring in Unreal is because we have a lot of different templates we can start with. Now, the one we're going to start with is actually the third person right here. And it's a third person level. It's the one I just showed you, right? Recognize that we also have side scroller and 2D side scroller. Never actually tried 2D side scroller. Let's make that one really quick and see what you get. Create project. Okay. So this actually looks like it would work very similarly. I'm sure your oh wow. Huh. This actually may even be easier than doing it in Construct if this is what I think it is. The only difference is we don't have a punch animation in here. But what you will see, or really doesn't look like there's a set aside run animation. But you'll see what you get is this. We're not seeing any jump animation, so we'd have to sort of set some of that up to make it work. And if we go in here, we could tumble around in this to see that really it's just these 2D sprites running on flat pieces of stuff. Right? So you're welcome to do that one. You're also welcome to do, let's see, file. Let's just exit. There's also a 3D side scroller as well. That is actually pretty much the same exact thing as our 3D third person. So the side scroller here it's really the same thing. The only difference is it has a locked camera and 2D axis, and doesn't allow you to move the character in depth. So if we go here, you'll see that it's pretty much just a 3D version of what we just played, right? So we can make any of these for this version of the project. I'll be honest, like to me, the one that's funnest to play to me is the 3D platformers, just because I like 3D platformers. Recognize that means you're going to be showing all of your animations from the back, right? Sometimes that's not as interesting to look at for an animator. So it may be worth trying one of these 2D animations just so you can show it off. The difference is with the 3D platformers, we can run at an angle so we can see it like in not from just behind, so you can show off your animation like that too. So I did a new project, third person. You'll see that when I play it, like by default, this is kind of how we see our character. But if I move my camera up here and then run like this, then I can get some other angles on this, right? And so really it's just like, how are we going to show this off in our demo reel, right? Before we jump into Maya, I'm just curious, how many of you have used Unreal before? Just curious. I'm going to walk you through all of the steps in Unreal. So don't shy away from the Unreal project because you've never used Unreal before. Like it's not it's a complicated part of it, but it's a complicated part that I tell you every step on how to do it. Right? So if that's part of the scenario or part of the issue, like just I can help you through that part. Okay. Which character should I animate? Liger. Let's find him again. So, TIGM classes, Greg, character animation, resources, new game rigs, Liger. Hit Control C. And I want to put this on my D drive somewhere here. Let's leave that open. Todd's got a lot of folders on here. Drag in class, paste. Okay, so there's my Liger rig. Let's go ahead. I already have Maya open. So I'm going to go ahead and set my project. File, set project. I'll go find that folder. Am I recording? I am. Liger rig, set. File, open scene. So you can choose either one, MA or MB. I'll go ahead and choose the MB. Save.
So if the files in the new rigs folder are all we need to open them in Maya, we just drag the whole file over. Or do we need to like make a new project and drop those in?
Oh, are you talking about like this? Like this guy here?
The Zelda one, which only has a few folders and then the one Maya file.
If you drag the Maya file is in the mesh folder, so you're needing that one. If you just drag that mesh file, then when you export her to the game engine, she won't have any textures and she won't have any.
So drag the whole folder from the
Yeah.
game rates.
Yeah, I would, like, pretty much whichever of these characters you want to work on, just drag that whole folder for it.
And then create a new project and put that stuff in the project.
You can just set your project to that folder.
Okay.
So.
Do you mean drag the folder into Maya? Is that what you're-
No, I mean, you don't want to work on it from the network because then you'll write over, like, you'll be saving your files to my, like, resources folder. So, I mean, like, drag that whole folder, and then you would set your project, like, let's say you're going to use this Jago character, right? You drag that to your desktop, then you'd set your project to the desktop version, or to your hard drive. Set your project to the desktop version of Jago, and it doesn't have to have all the folders in there. If Maya needs a new folder, it will create it for you in there after you set the project. So, okay, so interesting that we chose this one because he has a couple of things that are annoying about him right off the bat. One being, this is how you move him, is this arrow back here, right, that's on his back. The other thing is he is like an IK in his arms already, right? So that's cool if you want to animate him in IK. I don't. So I'm going to select that and go from FK-IK switch. I'm going to turn that to 0, and now he's an FK, right? Unfortunately, this is even one step more difficult. I think it's this rig, right? Oh no, I'm wrong. There was another version of a character that was an IK that still made that kind of difficult. Right, so now we have him in this setup. One more thing I want to have you all do before we start actually making some animations. So we're going to make a list of animations for him. We're going to make 6 animations. We'll export out those, and we'll export out the skeletal mesh. So it's the skeleton and the model, right? But I want to be able to test those, right? So I wanted to show you another program that's much lighter than Unreal that you can kind of use to test to see what comes out of Unreal, or that comes out of Maya. So if you go to that ETSU E3 folder again under Resources, this right here, Autodesk FBX Review, go ahead and install that. So just double click on it, let it install on your current computer. If the computer restarts, you'll have to reinstall it again. But what this is a way of, once we export out our animations, this is a way of testing them to see what came out of Maya.
So wait, can we drag it to the computer?
You can if you want to. I'm just installing it from the network because I just left a version up there so you can install it from any time you want to. Because it'll still install to your computer. It's that one right there. So FBX Review will allow us to export out these files and then test them before we go through all the problems of getting them into Unreal. Really, the only reason to do that is because then you can troubleshoot, if you're having trouble bringing stuff into Unreal, you can troubleshoot that to see if the problem was with your export or with your import, right? And if it looks fine coming out of Maya, it may be something with your import. So it's really just another way to quickly test these files after we export them. So, all right, here's my character. He's an FK. There are a couple of things I'm not a huge fan of on this rig, but including, kind of wish I had the ability of isolating his arms, but whatever, I'll still use them. Okay, so we're going to go to File, Game Exporter, and this is a handy little tool, even if you've never, even if you have no intentions of ever doing anything in games, because really all this is a timeline manager. So again, if you wanted to find that, File, Game Exporter. And what this is going to allow us to do is start to make a list of animations. So you'll see we have three tabs on the top, right? There's the models, the animation clips, and then time editor. I'm going to go to animation clips, and I'm going to start making clips for all of the animations I need. Now before I do that, we need to think about a little bit of other setup before I start making this, because I'm going to start choosing frame ranges, right? And so that makes you ask, well, how long is this animation, right? My idle, how long do I need my animation to be? Well, I want my animation to be somewhere between 5 and 10 seconds, I think, for this one, just to give them like some hovering time, right? So how do we figure that out? How many frames long should that be? This is a trick question in case you haven't caught on.
You have to interrupt the animation?
It's not like 24, no, well, that would be for, I have no idea.
So if I wanted to make it 5 frames long, right, or 5 seconds long, the real question is how many frames a second are we going to be playing this back in? For film, it's 24, right? But it's not 24 for games. Yeah. How many is it? 30?
Or 60.
I know most run at 60 now. It was 30 long ago.
So yeah, most of them run at 60. And the thing to recognize is there's a slight difference between frame rate and refresh rate. Right? So we call them both frame rate in game. But basically it's how many frames are rendering on your screen per second. And really, most games now, you want them to render at least 60 frames a second, right? Or around 60 frames a second. 30 is the bare bones minimum. And but then if you're looking at something like VR, well, it has to render at over 30 frames a second for each eye. So your frame rate for VR is 90 frames a second, right? So what do we choose, right? That's the hard part. Unreal makes this a little easier on us in that it just says 30. Like time exists within Unreal at 30 frames a second. It may render it at 60 frames a second, but really what it's doing is it's kind of slicing up your curve then, right? Instead of rendering frame 1 and then frame 2, and rendering that every 30th of a second, it's rendering it every 60th of a second. It renders frame 1, and then frame 1.5, and then frame 2, and then frame 2.5, and then frame 3, right? So it's slicing it up, and that's why like your curve, it's just sort of slicing into that curve that exists and rendering it that way. So we're going to set our playback range, or our frame rate inside of Maya to 30. That way we're exporting this out at the right frame rate. Unreal actually does a pretty good job at trying to convert that for us, but still, it just makes sense to understand it better this way. So we go to Windows, Settings and Preferences, Preferences, and this is under Time Slider, under Settings here, Time Slider. We see the option for 30 frames per second. Now we have this little drop-down box here too. I don't know for sure, but I believe, my understanding, and I haven't really tried it, so I probably should test this out before I teach it to a class, that doesn't actually change your permanent frame rate. That just temporarily changes the frame rate at which it's going to play inside of Maya. So basically it's like, I want to play this at half speed so I can see what it would look like slower. Right? The project would still be set to 30 frames per second or 24 frames per second. So just changing it on that little drop-down list down here next to the play button doesn't fix it. We have to go in here. I also, just while I'm in here, I also like to set this like update view under playback to all. And what that means is if I have 2 different viewports on my screen at the same time, when I scrub my timeline, both of them will update. So I'll go ahead and hit save.
What menu was the game editor thing under?
The
game exporter thing. Also, when I downloaded the Autodesk XPX thing.
Yes.
But now I can't find it. It just won't, like it didn't open. It downloaded, at least it said it did, but it won't open and I can't find it.
Where did you download it from? Just like double clicking up here, or just
Yeah.
pulling this here?
I double clicked on that and ran the installer.
Oh, just start typing FBX. Does it find it?
Yes.
Okay. So what was the first question though? The
The game exporter, what did you do in there? I missed that.
file game exporter, and that's just how you open it. We'll get to that in a minute on what we're going to do. Chris, what was your question?
What was the second thing you changed after you changed the frame rate to 30 FPS?
Oh, this is just it's not a necessity, but it's something I like to do. Under playback, all the way down here at the bottom, where it says update view, I change it from active to all.
Playback?
Under the time slider option, if you scroll all the way down at the bottom, you'll see playback.
Okay.
And then there's active and all. I'm also sharing my screen too on Zoom if y'all need to pull that up on your computer too, if that helps any. Okay, so once we have, and that's just so I just set that on all my computers all the time. So now we know that 30 frames is 1 second, right? And so if I wanted exactly a 5-second idle, I just need to do a little bit of math, right? 5 times 30. I don't like math though, so I'm just going to type in some random numbers. When I'm animating, I think more in terms of frame numbers anyway, and I think you slowly will as well. And also it kind of helps with organizing your clips to sort of like block them off, like starting on a 0 frame or whatever. So what we're going to do here in the game exporter is we're going to start making clips for all of the animations that we're going to export out, right? So we're going to start just by clicking this little plus sign here, and it's going to create a new clip. Now with that clip, I can give it a name. I'll call this idle, I-D-L-E. And then I can choose the frame range in which I want that animation to live, right? In this case, I usually start on frame 100. That way I can still do some stuff on frame 0 through 100 if I need to for like rigging purposes or need to test some skinning stuff out. I know that my base pose, I can set that on frame 0 and I can always come back to it. So I'll type in like 100 through, let's do like 300. So that gives me 200 frames of animation, about 7 seconds of an idle, right? It's kind of a long idle, but there's also a lot we can do in that time. The shorter the idle, the more you have to work to not make it noticeably looping. And you've seen idles before where they just feel a little too like repetitive, right? And so the more of a time we have there, the more we can have some variety. But that also increases the chance that I will interrupt that idle in a slightly less perfect starting pose, right? Like if the character turns their head a little bit, it may blend back just a little bit. In this case, that's not something I'm super worried about because of the way these animations trigger. So I'm going to create another clip, which is run. And I like to give myself a little bit of space. I wish I could remember where I put my water bottle. I bet it's over there next to the surgery.
Okay, I think when you did it, it deleted the idle one. Maybe the idle one.
Did you?
And then those two, did you choose that? That's what I did, it deleted the idle.
Okay. So a run, usually, and this is just me sort of saying this, a walk, like a sort of a brisk walk, usually takes about 1 second for 2 steps, right? That means a run's going to be faster than that. Somewhere, I'm guessing between 20 and 22 frames. Right? So that's probably, just to give myself a starting point, I'm going to say 22 frames. And I'm going to start on frame 500 just so I know I got a little bit of free space in between there if I needed to adjust the idle. And I'll do from 500 to 522, right? I'll add another animation, and we'll call this attack. And, hey, sorry.
It was locked out.
What was?
The computer, it was locked out. I didn't touch anything.
Oh, it's all right. No, that's fine. Yeah, it probably finished downloading. And actually, Todd showed me where another version of it is anyway. So, but thank you. Are you able to get back onto it though?
I have to log into mine.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
Is it okay?
Yeah, I would say it's probably done by now anyway.
Okay.
Thank you. So my attack animation is going to be pretty quick. I would say probably in the neighborhood of 50 to 60 frames. I may have a little bit longer for some like recovery afterwards or something. but that's a good starting point. So let's say 600 through 650, right? And in case you haven't tried this already, this is actually really cool that we're making this, even if you're not doing anything for game animation. What this is saving those ranges in our time slider. So that means if I need to quickly get to where my idle animation is, I just click this little film strip there, and my time slider goes to frame range 100 to 300. And if I'm like, nope, now I need to see the run, I click here, now it goes to the frame range where your run is. So if you're doing an animation that's even multiple cuts, multiple shots or camera angles, you can organize those camera angles this way as well. So this is actually really just a timeline organizer. Now, here we are on the next animation, which is the jump. Right? Now let's talk about that jump just for a second, because it's got some stuff going on with it. We talked about how our character has to be able to fall infinitely, and how we're going to break up those animations. So let's look at what those three animations are. Okay. Actually, I think it's, yeah, here we go. So with a jump, like we've sort of seen this before, right? We have the anticipation down to build up that energy, and then the character pushes off the ground. Right? So you may already be seeing the issue with this, is that when I tell Maya I need to jump, I don't really have time for it to anticipate. Right? I want it to come off the ground pretty quickly. Right? That up in the air, the mid-air pose is where our character is at its peak of that jump, right? And then we start to come back down. So the contact poses are both the last frame that we're coming off the ground, the first frame we're touching the ground, right? And then our recovery is sort of the energy that we absorb from that landing, right? And as we've talked about before, this is very similar to what we see in a bouncing ball, right? We get the squash pose on the anticipation, the stretch on the contacts, the up in the air, sort of neutral, the stretch again before we contact, and then the squash, right? Well, for this animation, we're going to break it up a little differently. We're going to break it up like this, okay? Our animation is going to, how do I zoom into this? No, that's not how I do it. So these two yellow sections are our idle animation, right? That's what's going to happen when I'm not giving it any input. Whenever I tap the space bar, I need it to play the jump up animation, right? Once it gets to the end of the jump up animation, I can go into the loop animation that is the top of that. Now that animation is just going to be the character hovering in space or hovering up in the air in a perfect loop, right? And that can play as many times as we need it to. I think the way you can kind of gauge what that animation should look like is if you think of a character falling infinitely. Anybody watch like the Bill and Ted movies? Anybody? Bill and Ted?
Yeah.
You know they're making part 3, right?
They are.
They are.
Yes.
Bill and Ted Face the Music, part 3. Yes. I'm really excited about it. My wife, less so. But I'm really trying to get her hyped up about it. Anyway. So like in Bogus Journey, when they're falling forever into purgatory, yeah, what pose would look good for that, right? You're falling forever, how would that look, right? This is just who I am, y'all. I can't change it. So, and then I label this wrong. This is the jump down, the point where they hit the ground. So you'll notice on this, the jump down is sort of that contact point into a quick squash, right? So both the jump up and the jump down need to be pretty quick animations. We're talking maybe like 5 frames. And the thing that's kind of different about the jump up, the jump up animation is we don't have time for that anticipation. So this contact pose is either going to be our first or our second frame. I'm probably going to push it for my first frame, but that's how we're going to test it. Really, our anticipation is the idle, and it's going to feel like we jump from that idle really fast. So if we push that contact pose, it will still have enough contrast in it to feel accurate, but we don't have time to anticipate down because we need the player to feel that reaction to their input. So So that's what we need. We need a jump up, a jump loop, and a jump down. So I'll name those really quick. Up. We'll put this one, let's say, 800 to 805. Jump loop. We'll do 805. And we'll make this probably about 2 seconds long, and let's say 865. That may be a little too much, it may be a little too short, we'll find out later. And then finally, the jump down. And do 865 to say, let's do 890 maybe. So it's about 1 second to impact and recovery, right? A little over, or a little under. Okay, so these are all the animations we need for our game. So this is where I really need to challenge you to be as sloppy and bad at animation as you possibly can, right? Don't do good animations at this point, because we may have to throw them away or we may do something completely different. Like really, this is about making the game function. I used to, I think you all know this, I used to work at Firaxis Games. So Sid Meier is sort of the resident genius that works there. And he would come in over the weekend and make a complete game. Like he would just, one Sunday afternoon, he'd be like, I'm gonna swing by the office for a little while. And he would just make an entirely playable game that weekend. I mean, in all honesty, he'd probably been tinkering around with it a little bit, but like it would literally be in just a day or so. He would make a fully playable game, and it would be so ugly. Like it was like, because the prettiness was not part of it. It was about, is it fun? And he would use like assets from old games and from like Railroads and XCOM and like just different games. He would duct tape this monstrosity together, and then he would send it out to the company and say, play this and see if it's any fun. And everybody understood that it wasn't supposed to look good. Was the gameplay fun? That is actually the essence of how a lot of game design is supposed to work. Right? Every production I've ever been on, you do a very rough test of something first to prototype it. Right? I'm currently working on a game where I'm creating boss battle animations, right? And we have to test stuff. It's like, if this character is going to breathe fire on us, how does that work functionally, right? And we do a very quick animation, like literally like maybe 15 minutes worth of animation to get something into the engine for testing. Once it's working, once the gameplay is fun, we can understand what that animation really needs to look like, and then we go back and we polish that animation and just replace the ugly one, right? So what we're doing is we're making the ugly ones today, right? And when I say making the ugly ones, I want you to time yourself. If you spend more than 15 seconds on one of these animations, you're putting too much into it, right? Like, we need something that will let us see this animation is actually happening. Now, before we can do that, I need to figure out how to select all of my character's controls. So let's see how I can do that. Every one of these are always different. Oh, look at that. It's like a bunch of controls there, doesn't it? How about if I do...
If we close the game exporter window, was it keep all the things we have?
Yes. Oh yeah. This stuff saves with the file. So you can close that and then file, open game exporter, and it'll still be there.
Right.
And yeah, even if you save the file and close it down, it'll still be back. So this doesn't have a very clean way of selecting all the controls, which is really kind of annoying. But I can still come up with something. I'm going to minimize this for a second. What I'm going to do is just do the dirty version of this, which is show none, and then just turn on my NURBS curves. And those are all my controls. I can drag select that to select them all. So if I open up my script editor, do edit, clear all. Make sure I'm in my custom tab. Drag, select everything, and then this will be my Liger selection button. Have y'all ever seen like videos of real Ligers? They're crazy. It's a hybrid between a tiger and a lion, and they're enormous and terrifying. Yeah, you search some YouTube videos of that stuff. Like, it's crazy. Anyway, so I have this button now where I can select everything. I have my game exporter. So I'm going to make my idle real quick. Here we go. Go to idle. I'm going to set a keyframe at the beginning and the end just to sort of hold everything down. All right. And then my animation is going to be, let's do something crazy. Turn on auto key so I can set this. Y'all timing me? I think I can do this in 15 seconds. Okay, there we go. There's my idle. He's idling. Playback speed real time. Now, again, the point of this is once I get this into the game, I'm going to have to wire all of this up to make it functional, right? And I want to be able to play the game and see that it is playing my idle animation. Like, if I could instead just make it say idle above his head, which there actually is ways of doing that, I would just do that instead. But this is just a way to see, okay, it is actually triggering the thing I wanted it to trigger, right? So, so my run is going to be super simple too, right? I go to my run, 2 keyframes, maybe 3. Let's do my first keyframe, forward and back. Select all of it. I get that one there, get one at the end, go about halfway through, and then reverse those. There we go. Running. Watch him go. Running Liger. Anyway, my attack animation, I probably need to go ahead and start back at my idle for that. So I'll go ahead and steal my idle keyframe just so I can get out of that run keyframe. Copy, go to attack, paste, paste. I'll go ahead and put that at the end too because we need to get back to this.
Which idle keyframe did you copy?
Just the start one, the first or last one. Like, because that's where everything's going to sort of blend from.
Wait, why do you copy these?
I just did that because that's what, well, you don't have to, but otherwise my character was still standing with his legs spread like from the run. So I'm really just trying to get him back to a neutral pose. In the real game, like once you're done, what you want is you want the attack to trigger from the idle pose. So let's say your character is like standing like this. You want to make sure that it starts from that pose because otherwise if it started from this, that punch would look like blend to here and then punch and then blend back up to here. Does that make sense? So it's like you want to start from the, you want to?
The full 300 seconds, right? Or you make it shorter?
I made mine like, I think 200 seconds, 100 to 300. It really doesn't matter though. If you wanted to do 300 seconds, that's just a 10 frame idle, or 10 second idle instead. So my attack, super quick. I just need to see that he's punching. I'll maybe go forward like 13 frames, set a keyframe on everything. Maybe lean the character forward. Oh, that's the tail. Lean the character forward. And now he's punching. He's punchy. There he is. Watch him punch. Okay. And, okay. So my jump up is a little bit more complicated, right? Like I said in that pose, I need to probably start from my contact pose where the character's pushing off the ground. What's actually happening in the game is the character is, all these animations are just riding around on top of this like node that you're moving in the engine, right? It's a capsule shape. And so whenever I hit the spacebar to jump, that capsule shape that has the character in it is going to pop up in the air, right? So really what I need is, as soon as I hit the jump button, I need to quickly transition into the pushing off the ground animation, because that capsule is going to come off the ground either way. If I don't do that quickly, then what's going to happen is the character is going to come off the ground and then play the animation of pushing off the ground, right? So it's going to look like he's just kicking off the air, right? So what I usually do is I start my first pose here with a strong contact push off, right? So I will go ahead and push this one a little bit just for purposes like so we'll be able to see it. I may spend a little bit more than 15 seconds on this one, right? Stupid knee. There we go. And just to see that jump happening, I'll throw the arms up in the air a little bit like this. So this is going to end in the jump loop pose, right? The one where he's up in the air. Okay, so let's go ahead and get a keyframe set on that. So because that capsule is going to be popping up in the air, we don't actually have to move our character up in the air too, or at least not very far, right? So really all I'm going to do is transition from my last keyframe of this. I'm just going to pull this foot up like this. And maybe just so I can see it a little bit better, I'll lean him forward and maybe even pull these arms back a little bit. I'm really putting too much into this already.
15 seconds.
I know. Animate faster.
It's supposed to look bad.
Yeah. Maybe a little bit of tail animation. Ooh, look at that. So now that's our animation. That's the jump up, right? And you'll see that it is really fast, right? It's 5 frames, right? Now that immediately transitions into the jump loop. The last frame of jump up, 805, is the first frame of jump loop. And so jump loop is just going to be something that stays in this loose pose and cycles, right? I need to be able to see that it's actually playing something. So what I would maybe do is just add a little bit of movement to the chest or something. Maybe I just do like that. And so now my jump loop feels like this. Now that may not be enough for me to see later. So I may obviously the jump loop is going to be a little bit more just like floaty, hovery. But this is just so I can see these triggers in the animation. The jump down is going to end, or is going to start in a contact pose, right? So again, I'll push this foot down on the ground, something like this. Right. Maybe like this. Key all that. Oh, I did that wrong. Sorry. I need that to stay in this pose. So probably over about 2 frames, that's where I will move into that pose. So down. And then very quickly, I'll probably go back and still that idle pose again from here. So I'll have it. And jump down. That's where I want to end. So that means I can pretty much use that same pose here too, except maybe a little bit more squash to it, all right? So now that means that's my land pose. There we go. So we should be able to see now if this is working or not. That's the entire thing. So I'm going to go ahead and save this now. File, save scene as. I'll call this Liger. Actually, let's go up a file. I want to save this under scenes, Liger.0001.mb. Save that. Okay. You with me so far? Mm-hmm. At least in theory. Mm-hmm. So, the FBX review thing we were talking about. What we're going to do now is export all of these out as FBXs, and that way we'll have a file to import into Unreal next class period. So that's where we're going to start. So that's what I want you to kind of have done by next class period. So this is where this thing also comes in handy, is it will also batch export all of the files you need to export, right? So the first thing though is I need to determine what elements need to be exported. And the answer is not everything, right? And currently, the way it's set up, where it says export all at the top, it's going to want to export everything in the entire scene. An FBX file, anybody ever use that in another program?
We used it in the
Principles of Game Design. You probably also use it, you may use it in lighting and rendering. Yeah. An FBX file is kind of a way of transferring model information, skeletal information, and skinning information, but it also will transfer animation, right? What it will not transfer is a rig, right? And what we're using right now, if you've had technical direction, you'll kind of understand this. If you're working in technical direction, you'll understand this soon. A rig is just a way of manipulating a bunch of joints, right? A bunch of skeleton pieces, right? And so if I don't want my skeleton to go through the floor, I have to create an IK system and a control for that. All a rig is a way of controlling those skeletal manipulators. Unreal doesn't care about that. It doesn't want you to animate once you get into Unreal. It wants a file that is already animated. So what we're going to do is bake all of that animation data onto the actual joints and then export out just the joints and the mesh, okay? So what that means is we need to identify the skeleton and the model out of all of this stuff in here. I've tried to pick out rigs that make that easy for you. So this one makes it kind of easy. I can help you find it on yours if you can't find it. But the skeleton is just in this skeleton group. So I'm just going to select everything in there. And then the mesh is under this Liger mesh group. I'm just going to hold down Control and select all of these things, right? Now instead of exporting everything, I could go over here and say just export the selection, but that means every time I have to export, I have to remember exactly what I had selected here, right? Instead, what I'm going to do is make a selection set that will just select all of these for me when I export it. And I can do that with this little button right here in the game exporter, this little blue dot with the plus sign. If I have all of that stuff selected, when I click this, it will create a quick select set, and I'll just say export. I'm going to say export A in case I have to recreate a different export set or something. Say OK. And so now you'll see it says export object set, and we have export A. Yeah.
Sorry, my rig is doing something super weird.
Do you say we're just supposed to select the? What are we supposed to
You can
select?
see that the button press, I've got the elbow control set, right? When I select it with my keyframe,
before or after you switch from IK?
The IK switch happens before this.
Yeah. So the IK, that means the FK control is hidden when you probably make that file.
No, oh, right, it was.
Because you transition. So probably that's not. So you just make a new button that has the FK in it. What were you saying, Chris?
What are we supposed to select for the thing? The fingerprint.
Right, so yours is a little different. So, character main control. So, character root.
I saw some joints in there somewhere. All the meshes are this low.
This is the little non-rated instrument.
What exactly am I supposed to be selecting?
All of the visuals.
Can I get the adjustment? Can I try
You can try.
Do I just need to select all of the bones and joints and all of the meshes?
You can try. So,
If I put the joints and the meshes, I was gonna just turn on the joint layer and the mesh layer, turn off the control layer, and so
well, it has to be selected in this. So let's try this and see if it works. Worst case scenario, just read the
So this
So take this. And just give it a name. Export. Okay. So once we have that export, and Chris, this will actually let you test it. This next step we're doing here. So one of the things that Chris just found, I tested the gorilla skeleton, thinking it was the same rig as the human skeleton. It seems to not be exactly the same. So Chris may be beta testing this to see if that rig works. So once we have this, we need to tell it where we want them to put the files, where we want this to put the files. So I'll click here. I'm just going to make a new folder, call it export.
Sorry.
Where do I put the export folder?
I mean, where did you get that window from? Choose directory to export.
So where it says path here,
Huh?
there's a little button right here, and that'll let you choose a folder you want to put it in. I just created a new one to put it in. It really, you can put them anywhere you want to, but this is like where it's going to dump them every time we export. And then the other thing I need to do is I need to put a prefix in here in the animation tab, right? So you'll see right below clip file prefix, it says idle.fbx. I'm going to type in Liger underscore. You'll see now it says Liger underscore idle.fbx. And that's in case you have more than one character within your scene, you can tell which animation goes with them. Now we're going to have to export out all of these animations, but we also have to export out the skeletal mesh, and that's what this model tab is for at the top. So all I have to do here is choose that same export folder, and then just type in Liger. So it's going to export out 7 files. It's going to export out my 6 animation clips, and then it's going to export out a skeletal mesh called Liger. So let's do that one first. If I just hit export on the model tab here, one of the things I want to make sure first is I'm not exporting all. I want to export object set and export A. Right. And I hit export, and it says exported successful. So let's go look and see where that folder is here. It is in Dragon class, export. So we get this Liger FBX, and if I double click and open that, you'll see there he is. You'll also see that he's in a pose. That's how I know that I'm pretty confident he will work in Unreal, right? Because this means what came out of Maya is a piece of mesh with a skeleton inside of it that has been deformed, right? That has a deformation on it, right? Let's test this out with the animations now. Yep.
Hold on. You're just after you do the thing, you're just supposed to have the one FBX file.
Yep.
Okay. And then no, I just haven't. How do I open the? I don't know how to open anything.
Did you go click on the Liger? Or Liger?
Sorry.
Okay, that's looking promising. So the model is exporting. Let's see if these animations export. If so, that means that will work with that stuff. Okay. So the next one we're going to do is the animations. Now this is where it saves us a little bit of time, is instead of having to go through and export each animation, and this animation clips, whichever one has a check mark next to it, will get exported out as a batch export. So if I hit export, it's going to start baking the keyframes down, right? And then it will animate or export out another FBX file for each of these animations. So you should start seeing them show up here. This is how we can test to see if this is really going to work. So if I double click on this, I got my Liger here. And then if I right click and get my play buttons up here and hit play, I should be able to see my animation playing, right? Now, it's not 100% a sure thing that if it's playing an FBX review, it'll work in Unreal. But it does mean that Maya is exporting out a skeletal mesh with keyframe data. Yes. How did you select? You created this set right here. What did you just chose the mesh?
I don't know. But like I said, I created a button that keyframe FK. And yet when I use it, but I'm in
Oh, that's something. Let's try that. Let's see if those work, because that looks like the skeleton and mesh.
We'll see.
Okay. So you can test out these other animations to see if they're working. So we got our run. Watch him go. Okay, so we have all of these animated and exported now. What we're going to be doing next class period is importing these into Unreal and triggering them so they're playable. Okay.
How long should it take to export export the FBX animations? Is mine still going?
It kind of depends on the character and the rig. Where you're having to select a couple of extra things in yours, it'll probably take it a little longer. If it's taking more than like 5 minutes in animation, that's a little long, but not unheard of. Usually it takes probably between 5 to 30 seconds in animation. So. Now, if you really want to test this before we get into next class period, what we can do is go to that Unreal editor. Right? And we could try to import one of these into our project. Just as a test here. So I'll just put it right here to see. Import to game. Export. I'll try this. Liger run. Open. Make sure import animations is turned on. And we'll just see if this comes in correctly. And if so, then this will make our lives easier next class period. So Liger run animation, watch him go. All right. So it seems like the Liger is working. Don't worry about that too much. We will go through that again tomorrow in a little bit more detail. Yeah. Okay. If I convinced anybody to do this in Unreal instead, right?
I mean,
Absolutely not.
I'm curious, I kinda wanna, I would consider.
So here's the cool thing with 2D animation, you got a couple of options though. Like you're just gonna have a sprite sheet that will go into any game engine. In all honesty, an FBX file will go into any 3D game engine too. You can put this into Unity just as easily. But you can kind of make that decision a little bit later, like maybe over this weekend as we're sort of testing it. For 2D animators, I would encourage you to probably go through the same process. Try to get a version of your sprites into the game working. So replace that little box with the arrow on it with maybe 2 stick figure poses, right, of a character running. And that way you can start to test out how your animations are going to work, because then you can just replace those. At the very least, you need some sort of playable version of like some placeholder boxes like we currently have. What you don't have on those placeholder boxes is like the punch animation or even an animation that's playing for a jump, right? So I can kind of help you out a little bit with that over next class period though. So. Okay, questions?
What do you want from 2D next class period?
So next class period, nothing is really due. The class period after that, we're going to play a prototype of your game. So you should probably be, I would say what I would be doing for 2D is getting some like placeholder, like little stick figure 2-pose animations for stuff so you can see them when they trigger. And I would probably start watching some tutorial videos on Construct and kind of working through getting that template working, just so you're a little bit more familiar with Construct. It's been a little while since I've used it, but I can still help you kind of get that stuff working. So also probably wouldn't hurt to kind of have a style sheet, maybe like a character sketch or something like that, so you know what your character is going to look like. So, other questions, comments? Yes.
Well, more about checking the animations in the thing, in the FBX thing.
Mm-hmm.
You were going a little fast for me, so I've been frantically trying to catch up, and I missed how to do that.
Double click. The FBX file off exported, you just double click it, it should open FBX review.
I don't know how to do that. I missed that. I was still animating.
Okay.
Is it fixed? Have the black frame around?
looks like maybe there's a floor plan or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the game exporter, you just, so what part? So you
I've done them all now.
Okay. So we need a selection set. So click out this plus sign. So put that plus sign next to skeleton. The one right. So I would select basically skeleton and then put the plus sign on mesh. GR Zelda again this time. You may want to collapse that. Well, just like the and then hold down control and select each of the ones that are invisible. Export. And then give you choose a folder you're first. And then give that a name for the prefix for the name, so it's like the character name. Then the underscore. And then export all, export object set, and then choose export. And then again choose the same folder. So that's going to export the skeletal mesh. So now go find that export folder. So we haven't exported out any of the animation yet, so that's the next step. So we'll close it up. And do it for the animation inputs. And hit export. So everything has a check mark next to it. We can export it out as an animation. And then you can just go through and check those. It's going to take a little bit longer because that's the makeup that you have.
Do I just open the mesh and then make it?
You just double click the, you can close that out, and just give a double click on the new file. So it'll take it a second, but one will pop that says Zelda idle, and you can just double click it and see that. Alright. Okay. Other questions?
Can you go over putting the animation into Unreal again?
I can, but I feel like that's going to start opening up a can of worms.
Did you already? I'm sorry. Did you already do it and I missed it, or did you not do it yet?
I did it really quickly for those of you who are kind of watching to see if you wanted to test it that far. The way I did it was very sloppy, and it's hard to get it back out of there after you do it once. So I can basically, you just right click on here and you say import to game third person, and then you just choose Liger, or we could test it by choosing one of the ones that has an animation on it. And the only thing you have to do is make sure import animations is checked when you do that. So if I hit import all, you'll see like it creates like 7 files. And it's not all the animation files, it's creating all sorts of stuff. Things pop up everywhere. But really, to see if it worked, if you just double click on Liger run animation, if it moves and is not exploding and polygons going everywhere, it probably worked. But that is not the way we actually need to do this in the end. So then you just select all of this and delete it again, because that's the way we're going to do it next class period. Is the way that it basically will import one skeletal mesh and apply 7 animations to it. And that's a slightly different process that has a couple of extra steps, and I want to keep us organized. So really the only reason I did that was that's to show that it did work. If it's working in FBX review, it's probably going to work, but I don't want to say that 100% sure. It's tricked me a few times, but I usually you can figure it out if it's working in FBX review. All right, y'all. Other questions? No. I'm going to stop talking now because I'm pretty sure I'm about 5 minutes away from losing my voice. So I'm also going to end this video, and the rest of the class is yours. So I'll upload this to YouTube. We'll pick back up here next class period where we'll get this stuff into Unreal and move forward. So stop sharing. Oh yeah, I gotta stop that video.